So you said that being distinct and setting an example is the way we Jews roll,
At this
basically.
point in our history, yes.
Yeah. But the question is, I think, amplified when you look at Jewish outreach within the Jewish community. Is it a bit different in that? Are the sort of the values and the circumstances different in that instance? Because here we're trying to make, in other words, we're trying to make the Jewish people more distinct by getting Jews reigniting their Jewish identity. And so, is there a case to be made for outreach with regard to the Jewish community?
First of all, again, I just want to emphasize that it's not all about distinction. There are many things that we are meant to be, and I would say that all Jewish education, Jewish outreach, is aimed at trying to allow our fellow Jews to be as engaged with the values, the beautiful values, the positive values, the infinitely beautiful values of Torah. Part of which is distinction when necessary and where there's a point of conflict. There are areas where currently in the world we don't need to, we don't feel distinct, and on the contrary, we're able to be integrated. But where our values differ, to be able to positively and confidently push that argument forward. And all societies need to give space for different arguments to that which are the consensus of the majority. I do think Jewish outreach is good. I think that engaging every single Jew that we can in Jewish education, in opportunities to learn and to grow is fantastic. The Talmud, quoting really the verse in Deuteronomy, says that Torah is meant to be Morasha Kehilat Yaakov, it's meant to be the legacy, the inheritance of the whole community of Israel. And when you see someone who is unaware of having won the lottery, when you see someone who's unaware of the beauty of their heritage and their culture and their traditions, that's a pity. Mm-hmm. And to dedicate one's life to being able to teach Torah and share it, I think is a wonderful thing. Where I think we need to be cautious, and in a sense this gets back to the pragmatic point, which in some sense does exist within the Jewish world equally, we need to be careful about the hard sell, and we need to be careful whether sometimes the hard sell, and we need to be careful whether sometimes in thinking about the packaging of the message, we can lose focus on the content of the message, and we can damage ourselves and our own authenticity in so doing. And we can adopt...
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. We can sometimes adopt inadvertently, in an attempt to make an attractive message, we can sell out our own values. You referenced before, for example, the idea of somehow to make Judaism more attractive, we should give up on some of our values. Equally, sometimes in trying to make it more attractive, we can... we nowadays have realised that very often the media used affects the content of the message also, and in subtle ways that weren't always obvious in the past. When you're communicating a message through the printed word, through the spoken word, through social media, through different types of social media, that affects what the message is and how it is heard. And I think, along with the rest of society, who are only beginning to learn how the new forms of media that are available and the routes of communication that we now have access to, I think as Jews, we also need to be sensitive to that. And sometimes when we adopt a marketing model, an advertising model, that can contradict the essence of Judaism. If the essence of Judaism is about that which is inner and real value, real authenticity, real care, real compassion, real spiritual development and desire to be the best person we can, and if the only way we can sell that is through charismatic education, through that which looks good and is superficially attractive, we can contradict the message itself. By definition, when you're in sales, you have to use that which is instantly and visually appealing. But is that really true to what the message is meant to be and what Judaism is meant to be about? So I think there is a danger in outreach in that sense, number one. And secondly, I think there's a danger in outreach when it can be a hard sell, when it can somehow lessen someone's ability to choose freely. In Judaism, the value above all values that we place is that of choice. To be human is to choose, and it's only in choosing that we are genuinely creative, that we genuinely exist, that it's genuinely I who am speaking, as opposed to in which I'm genuinely a subject, as opposed to an object in which external forces are operating. Good education is education that expands choice, education that informs and enriches and furnishes the mind so that people can make fuller choices and hopefully therefore better choices. Poor education and poor outreach is education which in some way limits choice and in some way makes someone feel guilty or imposed upon or out-charismaed, if I can coin a phrase, and therefore drawn after certain choices without really the ability
Is there an
to think them
argument though
through.
that they might end up doing it for the right reasons, and they might become, if they're compelled to start doing, becoming more observant, then eventually they'll start to see the beauty in it and do it of their own.
I'm skeptical about that. I'm skeptical that no one does everything in life. No one needs to do everything in life without any ulterior motives. Clearly, whenever anyone does something good, there can be a mix and a range of emotions. We human beings are complicated and we operate on many levels. And there can be a sincere desire to do good, along with a desire to have recognition or acknowledgement and other such things.
Yeah.
However, when something is sold, often to teenagers, to students who are perhaps at slightly vulnerable stages in their life, and when it is imposed, I don't believe that any genuine long-term good can come from that. And very often a heavy price is paid in which people can be wrenched away from family and community and later regret damage to very important, invaluable relationships in their lives. And therefore I would say true growth has to be through education, it has to be slow, it has to be internalized, and only that is sustainable, and only that really will allow a person to improve and come out as a better person. I would even say, and I understand that this might be somewhat controversial, I would say that someone who is an authentic human being, true to sincerely held values and to themselves, in some respects is better than the person who is inauthentic and superficial, even though what they're externally doing is right. Now, there's clearly limitations to that, because you can have someone who's very sincere and very authentic, who does, if he was authentic to his beliefs, who does terrible things. So this needs to be said with caution and care, but certainly there's a point of truth in that we shouldn't forget. And therefore the hard sell or the superficial sell really carries in it the seeds of what I see as considerable danger. Our primary form of outreach should be not marketing, but authenticity. Us shining, hopefully, through example, us being the best people we can, and embracing and engaging every person we meet, welcoming them into our homes, our communities, not being judgmental, and in so doing, hopefully, influencing people in a positive way, allowing them to make choices rather than imposing choices.
What's the difference between education and package marketing? So, for example, we do short videos, pieces of camera, where we'll explain, do a video on the Jewish impact on world values. And there'll be music, and there'll be animation and graphics. In a sense, it's packaged. It's all, I think, valid information. So where's the line between education and marketing?
A few points. The first thing is that I think in your field and what you're doing, of course, you also have to be careful with that. Anyone engaged with the media in any sense has to, and I know you do a constant inner reflection. Am I being true to myself? Am I being authentic in what I do? And I know we've had conversations about that over the years, about how one does that. So I would say it definitely applies to this field as much as any other. Pleasant packaging to make it easier to listen to and a comfortable and positive experience, no harm whatsoever. And of course, any learning environment should be positive and comfortable, whether the classroom or via YouTube. Where the packaging takes over is the point of danger. Where the attempt isn't to deliver a message for consideration, but as an attempt to persuade, is where things become more difficult and more complicated.
Could you give a made-up example?
I think there's several examples of what that can look like. It can be where a shared Jewish experience isn't true to how the Jewish world really works. It can be where something is deliberately and consciously concealed, and certainly if it's lied about. We've spoken before in this setting and others about some of the messages of Judaism that aren't always easy listening and don't always accord with some of the 21st century values, and when there's an attempt to conceal them or not be honest about what they are, there needs to be disclosure and honesty and full information given in order to empower people to make decisions rather than to limit them in making those decisions. And where a deliberate attempt is made to make something attractive in a manner which contradicts Jewish values, where there's the exclusion of those who aren't instantly appealing or instantly charismatic, that's a contradiction to the very values and the very message we're trying to give. And in all those cases, I think it's dangerous and can end up being untrue to what Judaism is meant to be. Having said that, All education is complicated. All education certainly involves in teaching students stage by stage and piece by piece. Much of what one learns in year 7, first year of high school physics, turns out to be untrue. We know that an electron isn't a little planet circling the nucleus in the middle, and yet that is acceptable education because it's a model which to some degree of accuracy is correct. So it is difficult to work out exactly how to build education in a manner in which one's building on firm foundations, piece by piece, that which we wish to share, but there needs to be a process of reflection and self-questioning and honesty, and taking external observations seriously in so doing. And I think those organisations that get it right...
you can name some of them. No, I'm kidding.
And I think that those organisations that get it right engage deliberately in self-reflection, sometimes bring in outsiders to review them, and take seriously the criticism voiced of them. When a Jewish institution, any institution, educational institution, gets criticism from the outside, it needs to take that seriously and it needs to think about what's being said and why that's being said, rather than act defensively. And I think there's a mindset behind this, which is...
It doesn't always mean the criticism is valid.
It doesn't always mean criticism is valid, but it needs to be thought about and taken seriously. And I think there's a deeper mindset behind this. And the mindset is, just because we are privileged to have access to Torah and a certain truth, does that mean we think we have all the truth? Does that mean that we think we have all the answers? And anyone who's going into education or any conversation with the premise that I have all the answers, and the person opposite me can't have access to the truth, because they deny some of the truths that I think are obvious and important, whether in belief in God or a certain sense of spirituality, they must be dishonest, they must be biased. I think that's a destruction of the possibility of any sincere and honest conversation. It's very easy to throw accusations of bias around. The believer says the non-believer just likes the free life in which they don't have values, and the non-believer says, well, the believer finds it comforting to have a father figure and a God in their lives. I don't think these sorts of accusations, I don't think they're caricatures, they're superficial, and I don't think they move the conversation on in any meaningful way. You know what, we're humans, we can only try and be as honest as we can. We may all have biases, and we can do our best to try and notice them. We can discuss ideas, we can debate and argue and consider and reflect. We can't make judgments about what other people's motives are, and if we are making these judgments, we may make a pretense of listening and seriously considering their view, but then it's not honest, it's not true, that's not really what's going on.
Right, okay.
In that note, I would mention the Gemara, the Talmud says, L'olam yagel odom lashono lo me'eni yodea. A person should practice saying, I don't know. Meaning to say, in any conversation, a person needs to practice saying they don't know. Firstly, because there's an invaluable message in education in when one says, I don't know. When one says, I don't know, you're teaching your students, the person you're in conversation with, that it's okay to say you don't know. You're teaching them that it's not about me as the charismatic educator. I don't have all the answers. You're respecting them and showing that there's an insight that they can come up with which is genuinely valuable. You're perhaps training them how to deal with the I don't knows in life. Let's go and look it up, let's research it, let's consult someone who knows more than we do. You're training them that one can go forward with an I don't know. After all, the wisest person on earth only knows a tiny fraction, if that, of the infinite wisdom that's there in creation, whether that's in the sciences, the arts, or indeed in spirituality. L'olam yagel odom lashono lo me'eni yodea. Practice saying I don't know, so that when you really don't know, you're able to say it. And to my mind, that's perhaps the most valuable message in education we can give our students is, how do we deal with I don't knows in life? Because we're all going to have to grapple with that. We're not going to be there to be teachers for our students the whole time. They are going to have to learn how to deal with something they don't know, how to attempt to find answers, and if they can't find answers, still move on in life. And in many ways, I think that's the most important education we can give our kids.
Well, I don't know. All right.
To stay up to date with JTV content, click subscribe here if you're on YouTube and hit the alarm bell. And if you're on Facebook, hit the like button, and under following, click see first. If you enjoy watching JTV content and want to help us continue to grow, please consider making a donation to us by clicking here.